file I/O functionality to a Java text editor. It's actually now able to read and write files like a typical text editor. However, there are still some conditions to be considered. For instance, typical text editors will not permit you to lose your changes. So for instance, as I begin to author, or even if I have an existing file that's opened that has undergone some changes, the application should not allow me to, for instance, close without prompting to save. So there are certain checks that need to be put in place. And this is what we'll focus on in this particular session. So the checks that we are going to implement have to do with understanding the state of our current text document. As you can recall, the text document class represents the actual document that we're working on, whether it's a new document or a document opened from the file system. So what we're going to do, one of the first things that we're going to do is add a new property to our text document class, which allows us to identify whether it has been edited or not. And this will help to inform the rest of the application so it can respond appropriately to prompt just in the event that it detects that the user has made some changes on the document or not. So as it says here, we need to add a facility to detect changes made to any opened documents or new documents so that we can prompt for saving if detected. Alright, so this means that we'll have to make changes to the text document itself in order to maintain a particular state to determine whether it's undergone some changes or not. We'll need to add a new type of dialog to our UI, which allows us to prompt the user in the event that they have made changes and they're about to exit the application, for instance, or close the current tab. In addition to that, we'll have to make some modifications to our handle save operation, for instance, so that we can update, for instance, the state of the document. And then we'll add some other handlers. So for instance, we'll add handleCloseDocument, which is often executed when a user wishes to close a particular document but not the application. And we'll also add the handler handleExitApplication, which, as the name suggests, will be executed when the user does choose to completely terminate the application itself. So to give you an idea of what we're going to produce at the end of this session, here you'll find a document that is now being edited, for instance, and when I attempt to close, it prompts me because it has detected that the user has made some modifications to the document. The prompt itself provides three options: cancel, no, and yes, and that's a typical scenario, giving them the ability to yes, prompt to save the changes, no, just forget about the changes and continue the close operation, and cancel, just to go back to editing. Likewise, if the user opens a particular file from the file system and chooses to close that file without editing it, the system should not complain because the system knows that the file hasn't been touched. However, if I were to open the file and then make a small change like this, the system, upon detecting that the user wishes to close the file, will know that the file has been modified. So all of these modifications we'll put in place, and we'll take it through the changes, take you through the changes in the text document class, the UI class, as well as the controller class. Okay, so that we can respond to these particular conditions. All right. So the first change it will make, it will be in our text document class, and as it stands, our text document class is at the heart of this particular modification because it needs to represent whether it has been edited or not. So we'll add a new property call it edited. It'll be a Boolean value, and we'll initialize it to false. And with this property, we'll need some setters and getters down below, so we'll just add those as well. So isEdited will be returning the value of our edited property. Typically with Boolean values, we usually use the term, or at least the wording, is XXX rather than get XXX, depending, or at least based on the fact that it's actually a Boolean value that will be used for testing purposes. And we just, in this particular case, return the value inside of edited. Likewise, we have a setter, setEdited. So this will be, as you can imagine, this will be executed when the system, when the application detects that the user has begun changing the content inside of the text document itself through the editor. And you'll find that the setEdited can take either true or false, which is convenient for us under the circumstances, because in the event that the user wishes to save and continue working, we need to, or at least save at that particular point, we need to ensure that we reset that value in that condition so they can safely close the application without being prompted. So this is all of the modifications we'll make inside of the TextDocument class. Next, we'll move over to the UI class itself. Alright. And with the TextDocument class modified, it will be able to hold the state, or at least a simple indicator, to tell the application whether the document is edited or not. So in our UI class, we will scroll all the way to the bottom, and we will add another dialog. Now this dialog is the same dialog that you saw with the three options, yes, no, cancel. And we'll call this dialog an unsaved dialog. So basically, just create a method, call it showUnsavedDialog, and whenever this method is executed, it will prompt the user to save changes, go back to working or cancel the entire operation, and or discard changes and close the application altogether, or close the particular tab altogether. So within this particular method, we will need a few things. The showUnsavedDialog actually needs the name of the file, because as you can recall, when we actually saw the dialog itself, it prompted with a message which included the name of the file. So this is what we're going to grab initially. To grab it, we need to get the actual active tab, and we saw that we implemented that method the last time, getSelectedTextArea. So we need to actually peel that away to get the actual text document object and look inside of it to find the name. So we'll use a temp variable, call it file name, okay? And we just make a simple check here to ensure that it does have a text document, or it does have something inside of it, so we won't be getting any null pointer exceptions. Just want to write robust code in that regard. So the file name itself we'll first have to look inside of the text area component, and then we'll have to get the text document inside of that text area component, and then finally we call the getFileName method on top of the document object to grab the file name of that current document. Once we have the file name of the document, then we can show our dialog, and it's a special type of dialog that you saw there. It's a confirm dialog, and we just call the show confirm dialog on the J option pane, and this takes a few arguments, the first of which is the parent frame. So in this case, since this is the parent frame, our text editor UI is the J frame, so we just put this keyword. It's really a modal dialog, which means that once it's shown above a parent frame, it will not allow the user to continue to interact with the parent frame beneath it, and this is basically what we want in this case. So that this keyword at that position does the trick. The next argument will be the message or the statement. So we'll tell the user the text in whatever file name that we grabbed has changed. Do you want to save those changes? All right. And the next argument would be a title. We'll just call it TextPad. In this case, you can put any title you wish. And then there's another argument which allows us to specify the types of options that's shown. In this case, we just need a yes, no, cancel array of options, and this is what this specifies here. And then finally, we want to specify what type of icon will be shown to the left. And in this case, we can use a question message type of icon. And this will complete the show confirm dialog itself. All right. And you'll notice that it receives an option value just like the JFile chooser returns a particular option value based on the button click. So does the confirm dialog. So yes represents a particular numeric value, no represents yet another numeric value, and cancel yet another. And we receive that value, whatever it may be, inside of option, and then we return option so that we can process it and interpret it elsewhere. So the showUnsavedDialog method is finished. Whenever that's called, it will display that modal dialog with the options and the message, and then it will return to the caller the numeric value representing a particular option that's chosen, whether it's yes or no or cancel. All right, and this is all the modification we'll need to make for our UI class. So far. So we'll need to also move over to the JavaTextEditor controller, okay? And we'll continue on after the handleSaveTextDocument method. We'll add our custom methods here. Now the handleSaveTextDocument itself will now need to be modified from a void to a Boolean value, simply because we need to indicate whether the save operation has actually been successful or not. And I'll explain why in a bit. So we'll make that first change, modify the handleSaveTextDocument method to return a Boolean value instead of void, and it will now include a new variable called saved. All right. Basically, the saved variable is added for feedback to inform other methods of the application that the operation has completed. All right. And we're going to add an extra check here because we realize that with our multi-tabbed arrangement, there may be a case where the user has closed all of the tabs. All right. And in such a case, we won't want to save anything because there's absolutely nothing visible to save. So what this statement does is it returns false, all right, to ensure that, okay, well, to tell everyone else that we haven't saved anything. It returns false if, there's absolutely no active tab or no text area to really look into to find a document to save. All right. The next modification is to use our setEdited method in our document, our TextDocument class, and we are going to set it to false in this particular case. Simply because in our handleSaveTextDocument method, if we can understand what's happening here, after we actually go through the save operation at this point, we need to reset the setEdited, or at least reset the edited state to false, so that we can continue to respond to the correct condition. If we do not do that, then the system continues to assume that the document may be, let's say, changed, even though the user has actually saved it. And in such a case, it will always prompt the user whether or not they have made changes after the first save. So this setEdited false here will update the current status within the text document after every save, so it goes back to a blank slate, so that if the user chooses to close at that point, without having made any changes, any more changes, at least following the save, then the system will not prompt. It will just allow the user to completely close the application or close a tab. And that's a more practical way to configure our application. In addition to that, towards the bottom here, we'd like to initialize here the saved value to true, because we understand that as we get all the way through our try statement, our try block, we have successfully completed the saved operation, all right, and we can set that value to true. If there is an error, such as an exception, we can say that the save operation hasn't been completed, so we set save to false. Now again, these all go towards helping to inform the application as to whether the save has gone through, so it will know whether the document needs to, or at least whether we need to prompt the user again just in case the last save was not successful. Finally, towards the end of it, we need to return that value, whether true or false, that variable saved. So our modifications to this method, handleSaveTextDocument, would be to add a variable saved here, add this little check here to ensure that we don't proceed if there's nothing to save, and update our document's edited state after the save has been successful, and then indicate a successful save or an unsuccessful save and return it. Alright? So here we're going to start a new method, and it's called handleCloseTextDocument. And as the name suggests, this will be executed whenever the application, or at least the user, attempts to close a particular tab. Alright? And this again uses a similar check. We don't want to proceed with this if there is absolutely nothing to close, just in case. So in this particular case, we need to grab the entire text document itself to find out whether it has undergone any changes or not. And to do that, we call the UI's getSelectedTextArea method again. Remember, that's going to grab the text area, the actual component that we type into for the active tab, and it will grab its text document inside of it, and it will return that and save it in doc. Once we have that reference to the active text document, then we can test to see whether the document is edited or not by just calling the isEdited method. Now if it is edited, then, only then, when the user attempts to close, will we try to prompt them. So in this particular case, we'll need to consult with our showUnsavedDialog method. Alright, as you can see the call here. And a good construct to use to interpret the integer values that it returns, representing yes, no, or cancel, would be a switch statement. It's a bit tidier in terms of code. So we can, in this particular switch statement, test for a yes option click, a no option click, and a cancel option click. So the first thing that we'll check for is a yes option click, and if the user chooses the yes option, then we want to call something else. So in this particular case, we're going to call our handleSaveTextDocument, but as a condition. So this handleSaveTextDocument will actually attempt to save the text document, as we saw in our previous session. But it will now return a true or false value. Now if it is true, then we know that it is successful, alright, and we can safely remove that editor tab from view, alright, because we know that, okay, eventually if the user has gotten this far, they have chosen to close that tab, and we have prompted them to save the changes, and they have chosen yes, save the changes and then close. So we have actually confirm that the changes have been saved, and then we can proceed to remove the tab itself in that case. The second condition would be the no option. That would mean that, you know, they don't care about saving, but they want their tab closed. So in that particular case, then we can just say remove that particular tab without even saving. And finally, the cancel option could be that I just the user is just telling the system to forget about it. Let me go back to editing. And in that particular case, you can just give focus back to the text area itself through that particular getSelectedTextArea method call and the grabFocus method call on top of it. All right, and this will cater to all of the three conditions, the yes, no, cancel conditions. Now, in the event that the document is not edited, all right, we can safely proceed with removing the tab. All right, so this is the other clause itself, whereby it's absolutely perfectly fine, it's saved, and it's not edited. We can remove this particular tab. Okay. Now, we need another method, handleExitApplication, and the handleExitApplication method will be executed whenever the system detects that the user wants to close the entire application and all of its tabs inside of it. Now, this handleExitApplication, it's a little tricky, considering that we have a multi-tabbed arrangement. Now, let's say that the user has 5 tabs open and they may have switched between them, modifying them as they go along. That means, let's say 3 of the 5 tabs have modifications in them, and we're only looking at the first tab. We have to ensure that the application considers all of the tabs, all right, not just the active one. So this particular method will go through all of the particular tabs, all right, and we'll have to actually go through all of the particular tabs, checking each one, and then find some way to prompt the user in sequence. But for now, just for simplicity's sake, we're going to consider just the active tab, all right, and implement that additional feature later. So in this particular case, we're going to say, if we have absolutely no tabs, then go ahead and exit. That's what that line is saying. Then, if we got this far, that means we actually have some tabs. So we're going to go ahead and grab the active tab through this statement, getSelectedTextArea, and grab the document inside of that particular tab that's active and save it in doc. All right, start a standard in that case in order to check whether it's edited or not. And if it's edited, then we use a similar approach as before. We show the unsavedDialog in a switch statement. We consider the first option yes option. We handle the save. If the save is valid, then we exit in this particular case rather than remove the tab. In the second option, if the user chooses no, then we go ahead and exit because the user doesn't want to save. And in the third option, if the user chooses cancel, then we give focus back to the editor component within the tab itself. Okay. In the event that everything is saved, all right, and the document isn't edited, then we choose to exit altogether. All right. So these are all of the modifications for the controller itself, and we've modified the text document as well. And we'll have to go back to the text editor UI and link these two new methods into the correct clauses. All right. So we'll go back to the UI itself, and we need to find our event handler. All right. So you'll notice that we need to make a few additions to our text editor event listener here. All right. So before we had new open save, but we need to modify close. Okay. Now the modification that we'll make here in close is to comment out the remove selected, text editor tab that was there before, and in place of that, we're going to call our controller's handleCloseDocument method. Okay. So this is the first modification under that you'll need to make. Okay. once you make that modification, then we'll need to add some extra code up top to detect whether the user has chosen to click that red X in the corner of the application's frame to close the entire application itself. Alright, so we'll go up above and we're going to identify, let's say within our constructor there is a just after a set default close operation, you're going to modify the set default close operation to do nothing on close. I think before it had exit on close, but in this case we're going to do nothing on close, simply because we'd like to control what and how the system closes the application itself ourselves. So make that modification there, and then you're going to add these lines of code. We're actually adding a window listener on our frame itself, and this is within the constructor, by the way. We're adding a window listener on the frame, and the window listener, through this means, through a window adapter, will override the window closing method. And the window closing method is executed every single time they detect that the user has actually clicked on the red X or any close button that represents the termination of the window itself. And it will fire off that particular method, window closing. And while it's firing that off, we would like to fire off our handleExitApplication method in our controller that we just built, which will handle the exit application. Okay? And once that's in place, we can then proceed to our exit menu option. So I'd like you to search through the constructor to find the exit menu option. Okay. In the file menu, I think that's closer to the top, right here. So in the exit menu option, in the file menu, I'd like you to add this line. We're just registering a listener on that particular menu item. All right. So that we can respond to it accordingly. So this will allow the user to actually close the entire application through the file menu of the application itself. Okay? And once we add that line and register the listener on the exit menu item, then we can proceed to our listener subclass below. Alright? And our listener subclass below, our text editor event listener subclass below, will have an additional case right within the same area of our recent addition here. We're going to add the exit case here and call the controller's handleExitApplication method. So you can see here that handleExitApplication is considered both for the frame itself and the window, as well as the file menu items exit option. All right. So once those changes are in place, then you should be able to compile your code and test out your new conditions and prompts.